what was your very first business venture?
It was cleaning gutters on houses.
At what point did you make the decision to decide to move to the U.S.?
Designed a list of goals that I wanted to achieve in life when I was very, very young. I wanted to drive a BMW. I wanted to live in a detached house. I committed a few bucks to feed some neighborhood kids in a church of 60 or 70 people. If you're willing to stand up and say, hey, God, you know what? Use me, I'm here. We've been building houses for over 10 years, but about 4 years ago, we started building them one after the other. And so about every 2 to 3 weeks, we hand off a new house to somebody.
What have you learned about business? It's just such a different world.
The Philippines now reminds me a lot of Ireland when I left it. There's an elite, there's the politicians, and then there's basically everybody else.
Genuine perspective, not just fluff, because people can read fluff. People are going through junk. Whatever it is they got going, we all, everybody does. One thing that I think people appreciate from people that are successful. What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of Successful DNA. I have my friend Shane here with us today. Shane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, man.
It's an honor to be here, my friend.
Thank you for coming. Today's guest, Shane, is a powerhouse in the world of business, buying and selling. Shane is the founder and principal broker of Vested Business Partners, a top-tier brokerage firm that helps entrepreneurs navigate one of the biggest moves of their careers, selling or buying a business. Originally from Ireland, Shane moved to the U.S. in 1992 and has spent the last 30-plus years starting, growing, and successfully exiting multi-million-dollar businesses. Maybe not billion yet. So, Shane, welcome, man. Thanks for coming. Let's start with what was your very first business venture? Let's go there.
Wow.
You remember?
I do. It was cleaning gutters on houses when I was about 12, 13 years old. And I had a bicycle and a ladder and a bucket.
In Ireland?
In Ireland, in Dublin. And I would go around and clean out people's gutters in their houses. And that was the very first. And shortly after that, my parents got into Amway, the direct selling company here. And I used to sell skincare and makeup to the neighborhood ladies. That's what I was a teenager. Yeah. And then in high school, I had a very, very lucrative business selling cigarettes. My dad had a fish and chip shop, which to sell cigarettes, and I used to work at the fish and chip shack. And the one lady, Gay was her name, used to sell me packets of cigarettes, the whole pack. And I would sell them at school. That was
How lucrative was it?
Well, I was making more money than anyone else in school, everyone else in school combined, So I was always a hustler. I guess I learned very young the power of making money and the power of having money in your pocket at a very young age. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, we have a member in our team. He's probably 20, 21 now, but he's been with us for a while. And even before that, he was a high-ticket closer. And he's been on the podcast. We haven't released it yet, but he was in high school, similar to you, like 17, 18. And he would sell a high-ticket course after school and then kind of during school. He was making like $12K a month. $12K a month. Like there's not many high schoolers in the country making $12K a month. So
yeah, there's probably more of them than you realize.
Yeah, probably is.
Yeah,
especially in today's like online world and whatnot. Did you always? So you always had that entrepreneurial spirit. Did you ever have any jobs where you kind of weren't the entrepreneur, that you were the W-2 position?
When I came to the States 32 years ago, I worked for a company in Norwalk, Connecticut called MBI. We're a marketing company for maybe a year, and that was it. Other than that, I've worked for myself my entire life.
Mm-hmm. And then, what was life like growing up in Ireland?
Well, at the time when I lived in Ireland, we lived through a really bad depression. No opportunity. In the 90s, they coined an economic boom called the Celtic Tiger. But that was after I left, where a lot of European money and so on and so forth poured into the country and changed a lot of things. But when I lived in Ireland, there was little to no opportunity, you know. There was the people that ran the country, meaning the government and the businesses and the Smurfits and so on, and then there was everyone else, and there was very, very little of any kind of a middle class, I guess. You know, there were nicer neighborhoods in town and stuff, but I mean, back then Ireland probably had about 3.5 million people. It's a little bigger now.
What did your parents do?
Well, my parents my dad was a painter by trade, and my mom was, well, she raised the kids, you know, she had 5 kids. Then they started an Amway business, got into network marketing 45 years ago, maybe, which they still do today. Not with Amway, but they're still in that industry today. Very, very successful at it.
They're still in Ireland?
Still in Ireland, yeah.
Do you go back much?
Yeah, I was there a couple of months ago.
Okay.
Back every year. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So at what point did you make the decision, and what was that like to decide to move to the U.S.?
Well, when I was very young, when I say very young, like 13, 14 years old, I had written a list of goals, right? So when I talk to people like you, a lot of the guys in our group at church and stuff, I talk a lot about setting goals. And when I was very young, 13, 14 years old, and I would have learned this from my parents, been in the environment they were in, been around Amway and that kind of thing, listened to people like Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and so on. I designed a list of goals that I wanted to achieve in life when I was very, very young. And one of those was to go live in America. And I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to drive a BMW. I wanted to live in a detached house, which, you know, we're all foreign to 99% of Irish people. And that's what I wanted to do. So when I turned 30, I lived in Massachusetts at the time. I lived there for a very brief period. And I turned 30, and my wife gave a surprise party for me for my 30th birthday. And my parents showed up at the party. And my mom showed up with this notebook with the said list of goals in it, you know. And she went through them all. But with the exception of one or two, I had kind of achieved them all at that stage. I was 30. So I had always wanted to come and live in America.
You were 30 in 92 when you moved here?
I was 26.
26.
Yeah, so it was a few years out. I'm 59 this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
92, there's this podcast, and this guy that runs it, it's an awesome podcast. He was born in 1992. Podcast is called Successful DNA.
That's you. Good for you. 92. Okay. So we birthed at the same time. My new life in America and your new life on Earth. So yeah. But I'd always wanted to live in America. Always.
So what happened when you got here? What was the kind of the first? Why Connecticut?
Well, I had met a girl from Connecticut and come over and got married. You know, and I started. You know, my mother-in-law at the time worked at this company called MBI, and she kind of put in an application form for me, if you like, and I got a job. And was fascinated by what this company did and moved up and what have you, you know, very quickly. And after about a year, I said, okay, that's enough of that. I'll never go where I want to go here. I didn't go to the right school. You know, these were Ivy League guys that ran the company, marketing gurus. And I wasn't Jewish. And that was the fact. Those are the guys that ran the company, and I'd never be the CEO of it, so I left, you know. And started, I'd met somebody who had, in my job, I had met somebody, and the two of us had decided to start a business together, and up in Massachusetts, and we did.
What kind of business was it?
Fulfillment, you know, third party stuff. Did a lot of tinning, electronics for Sikorsky, and a bunch of really interesting kind of things. And we had a deal, and he reneged on his end, so I quit. And went and started my own company then, moved back to Connecticut and started my own.
Another fulfillment business. Cool.
A fulfillment business more of a niche business I used to repair trinkets and trash, as I call it. But at that time, Chinese were really making an inroads with you know, manufacturing in the States, you know, you're going back 30 years ago. They've gotten substantially better at it in the last 25, 30 years. But at that time, there was a lot of things made in China that would arrive here and there'd be some material defect with them. So I started a business handling those defective products. I used to fix them in volume. It'd be hundreds of thousands of them, millions of them sometimes. And that's what I did.
How many employees does that business have at the peak?
And that company was about 65.
Cool. And you sold it?
Yeah.
Cool. When'd you sell it?
What's that?
When'd you sell it?
About 10 years ago.
And then what was life like between then and Vested?
Well, I moved here to, one of my daughters was in law school here. So Cynthia and I had come up and down a bunch of times while she was in school and really kind of liked it. And I had sold that business and I had fulfilled all my obligations to the new owners. We kind of like it here. Cynthia's from the Philippines. So she didn't like the snow. I kind of had enough of it too, the cold weather. So we moved down here. We bought a house down here and come up and down a few times, then eventually moved here within 6 months maybe. And then when I moved here after, we were here maybe a year or two, and I started to get itchy feet, looking for something else to do. One of those goals on my list was that I want to retire. And I remember, keep in mind, I'm 13 or 14 when I'm writing this list. I wanted to retire a millionaire before I was 50. And I did. And retirement is not all it's cracked up to be, So, but we enjoyed a couple of years. We traveled quite a bit and had a little fun. And then I started looking for something else to do. And in the process of looking for another company to buy, I met a guy from Sarasota who was another broker. And he had a couple of companies for sale that had interested me. And he said, "You should do what I do," And I was well aware of it because I'd used brokers multiple times. I just said, "Well, you know what? Let's kind of hang out for a few months and see." So I kind of shadowed him for a few months and went on a few, helped him with a few deals and kind of got to know the space a little bit and said, "Man, I really like this." I liked the interaction with people and the kind of people you're dealing with, and I liked the whole deal process, and I liked the different companies I was meeting and how they like it. We live in our own little bubble and world. Sometimes you forget that there's a ton of really interesting other businesses out there, So I got to know some of them. I said, I really like this. So I went and got a license and started doing it, and then went and got my broker's license and opened my own brokerage. There's a lot more to that than that, but that's kind of what happened. So now I own Vested Business Partners.
When you sold the original business, who bought it? Was it just another individual, or was it private equity? Or
it was actually a media group out of Chicago.
Okay. A media group bought a fulfillment business.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, the guy that headed that group saw the writing on the wall that, print advertising was going out of business. And so this is going back 10 years ago when online advertising, media presence is just getting bigger and stronger. And they were looking to get into something else where they could see a future in it, I guess, So they bought us. Yeah. And I've been very successful with it since. I stay in touch with them,
So you and I know each other from church, and we've had Kurt on the podcast, our pastor. One of the things that we kind of all agree about is our views on retirement. Let's get into that a little bit. What's your view on retirement?
There is none. My dad's 83 and still going at it. Why would you retire? I mean, I that's one of those things I can't process. Like, what do you retire from, or what do you retire to? What do you do?
For people in my position, and maybe I'm being selfish with this question, but we built a thriving business, and of course there's part of me that wants to retire and kind of travel the world and do kind of whatever I want to do. What should my viewpoint be on an exit, in your opinion?
Well, you can travel the world, and like we said before we started here, the ultimate flex in life is freedom.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the stuff. Stuff is nice.
What is freedom?
Freedom is living life on your terms.
Yeah.
So you want to travel. There's a lot of really interesting places in the world to visit. Maybe you get involved with something like we're involved in the Philippines, as you know. Maybe you get involved with something that becomes some lifelong passion. Maybe there's some things you do that, I've really always wanted to do that. So it's a hobby. I don't mean playing golf. I mean something, maybe you want to be a coach to entrepreneurs and help businesses get off the ground. Maybe you want to get into some new technology or into some new deals where, hey, I'm not the daily voice, but I help steer the ship,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I've thought about that, and like, and there's two parts to it. One, this is for me and you and every entrepreneur, everybody that, wants to start a business one day. Like, you have to build a business, and I've said this on the podcast 1,000 times. Not only can it run without you, but it has to be able to grow without you. And so that comes down to the people you hire. Where we have our C-suite, our CRO, our COO, I know that the business will run without me if for at least a certain amount of period of time, because our COO is the best in the business. And I know that our company will grow without me for a certain amount of time because our CRO is the best in the business. Now they all have to work together, and so those guys have to work together, and then that's my job, right, to come in and just make sure the whole entire enterprise is working together on that factor. But it's interesting, so I could do that, and then my thought is, what else do I want to do? And so that gives me the freedom to kind of do whatever else I want to do. And there's three things I've thought about. One, had the ability to, especially as my boys get older, they're 5 and 3 now, but have the ability to jump on a plane tomorrow and kind of go wherever we want to go. That's one thing. Saying me and my wife, especially as the boys get older, and maybe wherever it is that happen in life. Two, I really enjoyed the podcast as a hobby. And so growing it, and, doing a lot of work on it, and getting it to a point to where it's just, one of the largest podcasts in the world would be fun. And then three, which is like kind of funny, but start more businesses. I've actually looked in to buying, in your world, home service businesses. Do you? What is it?
It's a guy over on Lakewood Ranch in, beside Sarasota. He has 4 employees, all non-permitted work, so tile floors, backsplashes, remodel kitchens, painting, blah, blah, blah. Does about $1.5 million a year in revenue, and from that takes nearly half of it in profit. But he's looking to retire and get out of it. But all his work is in his neighborhood. Does zero advertising, zero marketing.
It's been interesting. So I've dove into really 3 trades that I've been most interested in: HVAC, plumbing, and garage doors. And then garage doors is a little easier, and because for example, the HVAC business, this more than I do. Like, we have our own general contractor here, so it was my thought, hey, I got a GC, I'll just toss them on the HVAC business ready to go. But that's not the case. You have to have a mechanical HVAC license. To have a mechanical HVAC license, you have to have 5 years experience in HVAC. And so, like, he would have to go on the field for 5 years to get his HVAC license. So then I run into a roadblock.
Well, there's workarounds, all that stuff. Florida has a funky kind of licensing requirement for a lot of things, but there's a workaround all that stuff. That's easier than
workaround for everything.
Yeah, there is.
Like the IRS tax. Yeah. There's a loophole for
everything. But I tell you what I've experienced in my business when you talk about that, right? Is that guys that come in and buy an HVAC company, buy 5 of them, buy 10 of them, buy 110 of them, and they're buying these on a multiple of, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4, depending on the size of the business.
They roll it up.
And then they roll it up and sell a multiple 30. There's no shortage of money to buy the bigger companies. None. When we put something on the market for $20 million, there's a queue. There's no shortage of money between VC guys and funds and family trusts and so on and so forth.
I agree. If you go on BizBuySell or any of the websites today, go look for a garage door business. There's less than 10 in the whole entire country.
And their business they're never going to go out of business, and they're never going to be replaced by humanoids or robotics to a large degree. Some business, some trades obviously will, and some functions and some manufacturing and so on and so forth. But there are a lot of things that will never be replaced by robots.
So I like HVAC business, especially here in Arizona. It's always going to be a need.
We're in Florida.
Here?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll do it anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a team, and I have a couple buddies here that I would be willing to invest in.
Yeah.
And get them started.
Yeah.
And
well, now's the time to buy them.
I know.
Over the next, 5 to 10 years, there's a massive transfer of wealth going where boomers are getting out of the business. The kids don't want them.
Like you said, everybody, the reason for selling, everyone I see is just like you said, like your one you have for sale in Liquid Ranch is retirement. They're small businesses, and the kids don't want them, like you said, and they're just looking to get out what
Take
they can.
these as some, when you start consolidating functions over 5 or 10 or 20 companies, it's all money goes right to the bottom line. You add technology to it. You just create something magical that is very, very valuable, very valuable.
I want to dive in a little deeper into what you've learned so that people can understand what's inside of people to make them successful between you and all the businesses that you've worked with, bought and sold. Before we do that, though, I want to take a little break and dive into what you're doing in the Philippines. For those that don't know, just kind of start from scratch. What's the work you're doing in the Philippines? What organization is it through? Kind of talk through that a little bit.
To start at the beginning, if you like, I met a guy. Everything starts with meeting somebody, right? I got a phone call one day from a friend of mine who said, hey, I got a guy, a friend of his. This is a guy, a third or fourth down the line here. A guy who's looking for somewhere to store some medical equipment. And turns out the guy was kind of outside the door of my office, literally, because his sister-in-law lived right near where my office was. And I met this guy, and he was a medic. He was from Vermont. He was a carpenter by trade, but he was a medic, a volunteer medic up in some town in the middle of nowhere in Vermont. And he had went to the Philippines with a couple of friends, a church group on a missions trip or something, with doctors and so on, and saw massive needs for helping people and touched his heart. So he started collecting used, retired, old technology, expired equipment and supplies from hospitals and clinics and so on, and shipping it over there. And he had some space that was given to him for free, because we're down in the New Haven area, so there's Yale, New Haven, St. Raphael's, there's St. Vincent's and Bridgeport, massive hospitals all in the tri-state area. And he had been told, hey, get your stuff out of we've sold the building, can't give it to you free anymore. And between a series of phone calls, he ended up connecting with me. His name was Bill, one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. And Bill and I became friends, and I started helping him. Now, at this point, I had a warehouses, I had trucks on the road, I had staff. So I started going out and collecting the stuff, and every month we ship a container of stuff to the Philippines. Incubators, x-ray equipment, hospital beds, the whole 9 yards. Whatever a hospital was throwing out.
It was just old. It worked.
It works. Nothing wrong with it.
It was just,
yeah. Or I had the ability, and I had guys in my that could fix stuff. So we'd refurbish equipment, So we started fitting out hospitals in Mindanao, southern Mindanao in the Philippines. I did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then I went there. And just kind of on a fact-finding mission. Went with a group of doctors and nurses and stuff. And these guys would go and do surgery for 3 weeks straight. Southern Mindanao, in Dapitan and Dipolog, where I work, very, very impoverished, a lot of slums, a lot of very, very poor people. And it just touched my heart, And I went back 2 months later on my own. Don't know why, what I do now, but I didn't know why at the time. Went back 2 months later on my own, and I had met the pastor of a very, very small church in Dapitan City. Told him, hey, I'm in town for a week. Let's have lunch or breakfast or whatever. Come over, and we sat down and chatted. And the day that I left, at this time, I didn't really know why I was back there. I mean, it touched my, but I mean, I had been to Africa, I'd been to the Congo, I'd been building churches in different places in the world for all my life, but didn't really know why I was there, but knew God had called me to go and be, you're on the other side of the world in, Zamboanga. If you look on the State Department's map, they'll tell you, don't go there. That's where all the bad guys are, the terrorists, it's where they're all trained. One of the 9/11 cells trained there, Wow. So it's not a place you go. But
in the Philippines?
Yeah. Yeah, in Zamboanga City. Never felt unsafe there, and here I am on my own. And the day I was leaving, I said to this pastor, I said, hey, look, I really feel in my heart, I want to send you $150 a month for a year to feed the kids in the church. They had somebody give them money. Now, we could have given them more, but that's what I felt in my heart to do. And that's a lot of money. And I figured out how many kids were there, how many kids in the neighborhood, and so on and so forth. And I figured out how much a bowl of rice and a chicken leg is, and said, okay, we can do this, and we can do this for a year. We'll commit to that. So we did. And the rest is history. So I could keep you here for hours, the stories of the opportunities that we've had to be able to help people.
What's the craziest one?
What's that?
What's the craziest one?
Probably eliminating dysentery. We found out that the Philippines is the second highest rate after China. And then we found a company in the UK that makes a spoon, a very particular type of spoon. It's a measuring spoon. And in one cup on one end is sugar, and the other cup on the other end is salt. And you mix that with a certain amount of water, and it alleviates the problem. 1 dose for kids, 2 for adults. You're talking about a city and a place that has abject poverty like you've never seen. I'm talking about moms collecting nettles on the ground and boiling them for soup for dinner. Or I met moms who, hey, she's got 4 kids. I can feed these 2 today, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. It's survival for the day. We discovered, we went to Dollar General, people, and bought a truckload of, those Pyrex jugs that have all the red markings on them, right? You can buy them in plastic, and you can buy lollipop jars empty. So we had churches all over New England make us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these packs with sugar and salt. And we put them in, I think we had about 200 of them in a lollipop jar. And we sent them a spoon, a lollipop jar full of stuff, and instructions on one of those jugs so that they could make them themselves. And the reason you did in the lollipop jar was kept the bugs out. It's the sugar. And we put together a box, a kit, and we filled a container of them and sent them. And every field nurse, every doctor, every village, everybody in that entire province, Mindanao is one of the biggest provinces in the Philippines, got one of those kits, and we stopped that problem.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I don't have as much experience in the Philippines as you do, but we employ probably at this point 30 to 40 Filipinos. It's called VAs here, right, and virtual assistants. And but what I thought was interesting. This is my first business. Really, I had no experience of building a business, and I just assumed my only experience with overseas employee was the person on the phone that you can't understand, right? And so, which couldn't be completely further from the truth. We have, those 30 to 40 individuals in the Philippines. A few of them are in Venezuela as well, but there are some of them that I would choose over, any of our stateside employees.
We actually put kids through VA school in the Philippines.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's interesting because market rate is like $3 to $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Which I was like, I'm not paying somebody $35 an hour. Like, that's kind of silly. Which, okay, cool, Elliott, you pay them $8 an hour, great. But still, let's double what the market rate is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it not just because I felt like it was the right thing to do. Even, I'm not trying to boast myself because it's only $8, but at the same time, they're all still with us.
Yeah.
They haven't left.
They're amazing people.
Yeah. They haven't left. And so
amazing people.
Yeah. We take care of them. We have a strong culture, and we pay them well compared to their peers. And so, and $8, there goes a lot further than it does here. The cost of living is dramatically different. And it's funny, one time, I'll have to show you pictures. One of their, the team leads messaged me. He was like, hey, I really want to take the team out to, get them all together. And I don't know where they live in the Philippines, but most of them all live in the similar, at least they can get together. So we rented them an Airbnb out there, like one of a big house with a pool, and it was like, I don't know, $400 for 3 nights total. It was like a big mansion. And so that's cool. When you go back?
Probably next year. Yeah, we were there last year.
How do you get there?
You fly from here to somewhere in Asia.
Yeah.
Japan or Korea or somewhere.
Straight from Tampa, or do you stop in?
No, you got to go to the best way I've found is to go to New York.
Yeah.
I prefer to go to New York. Yeah. And then from there, go to Japan or go to Korea or Vietnam or somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then from there, fly to Manila.
Gotcha.
And then from there, we usually have to stay overnight. And then the next day, we got a flight down to to Pollock.
How far is that flight from Manila to down there?
It's an hour,
Yeah,
if that.
because it's not a very big country.
The Philippines,
Yeah,
110 million people.
yeah. Well, it's a lot of people, but in terms of like
Geographically, landmass,
yeah.
Well, it's big enough.
Do you know what state or what area is compared to in the U.S.?
It'll be half the east coast of America at least. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Okay.
Yeah, I've driven all over Luzon, the main island where Manila is. I've driven up and down up to Alicia and Nova Vizcaya and stuff. It's a pretty interesting place. It's a very, very interesting country. Cynthia and I feel absolutely honored and privileged to do what we do there. And we still have a lot of, we started helping people there, then realized, hey, Shane gets run over by a bus. The money stops. We have some sustainable programs out there that help pay for some of the stuff we do. We feed a lot of kids every week, lots of kids. We educate kids, put kids through school, through nursing school, through VA school, help go to college. And for the last 4 years straight, we're on our 4th year straight, we've been building. We build houses. We've been building houses for over 10 years. But about 4 years ago, we started building them one after the other. So about every 2 to 3 weeks, we hand off a new house to somebody. And these are people that would never, $2,500 builds a house. And they're beautiful. They're really well done. With the same crew that we've employed. We've bought half a mountain for
same
the
house in the video you sent me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very similar to that.
Yeah.
But, we did a deal with some guy up on the mountain to buy half the forest and, replant it and what have you. And it's a bit of an enterprise now, because we've got crews of guys and, these are people that would never have a home, ever. Unless some dramatic shift happens in the field, which is another whole conversation. There's just, the poverty is it's heartbreaking. So we feel privileged that we get to do it. It's an honor. Not everybody gets to do that, although I do think that opportunity is there for everybody. I think maybe some people get lost in the weeds of, well, if I had money, I would do it. Or when I make money, I'll do it. Or when I'm successful, I'll do it. And I think you miss the plot. I think you can, maybe there's a neighbor 2 doors down from you that bringing her a casserole every Thursday night would change her life. Or getting behind grandma at the supermarket and paying for her groceries because she's got 9 things in her basket and she's paying cash and she's counting out her pennies. You've seen them. Buy her groceries, And I think we lose the plot thinking, oh, what, I can do some big stuff. This started with $150 a month for a year. So we committed $1,800 13 years ago. We committed a few bucks to feed some neighborhood kids in a church of 60 or 70 people. And, you go back to that church now, and when they do their Thanksgiving celebration, which is not too indifferent to ours, but it's a big sub day once a year, and there's 1,400 people at it. So feeding kids has made an impact. I'm not a preacher, we leave that to Kurt. He's good at it. But, my preaching is with a bowl of rice. Because people don't care what you know till they know you care. You've heard that, right? So that's how we started. But that was, I think, the genesis of that are going back further. It's like, hey, Lord, here am I. Use me. And I think that's where that started. So, because before I started working in the Philippines, I knew God wanted me to do something. I knew, and that's, again, a bigger, longer conversation, but I knew in my heart, hey, life isn't all about me, even though we think it is, right? But I knew God was moving in my heart to do something. And the Bible tells us that the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. That harvest is plenty, and it's next door to you where you live. It may not be a physical need, but there's needs everywhere. If you're willing to stand up and say, hey, God, you know what? Use me, I'm here.
So you've done a lot of business out there. Like, what have you learned about business? It's just such a different world. What have you learned about business over there?
In the Philippines?
Mm-hmm.
It's owned by the elite few people. The Philippines now reminds me a lot of Ireland when I left it. There's an elite, there's the politicians and the elite people, all the wealthy people in the country, and there's a small handful of them. And then there's basically everybody else, and there's no middle class per se. I think Manila, if you take Manila out of the equation, you could say that wholeheartedly. Manila's a little bit different in that there's some skyscrapers and condos and apartments and people have jobs and stuff. But I mean, once you get outside of the city, it's pretty much everybody's fighting for themselves.
We actually have an investor. I just thought about this. That they invest in our service, B&B Turnkey, where we find cash flowing Airbnbs and whatnot. But anyways, they live in the Philippines and they actually build their developers, and they develop skyscrapers in
Manila. Yeah, and Cebu is another big city, and the Baguio city up the north of Luzon. There are some big cities that have big tall buildings, and there's some bougie people that live there for sure. But I think there's a huge disparity in how the people live. And again, another long conversation, because I've been there for so long and I know so much about this country, people are suppressed. I've always maintained, and I felt this in my heart for a long time, that at some point we're going to get to do something really big there. Now, I think what we do is we make an impact. Sure, we do. But we're helping one family at a time. We're helping one neighborhood at a time. And it goes, it's great. But I've always felt that at some point we'll get to do something really big. We'll get entrance to that because of the time and the money we've put in up to then. In other words, we're building credibility there. Because everything is political. You need something done, you have to go through a politician. And we will get favor at some point. I don't know when that is, but we'll keep going till that happens. But I've always felt, I wonder, why can't Nike make their sneakers there? Why can't Ralph Lauren make their shirts there? Maybe with this shift in, the political world, maybe that will happen down the road. I don't know. But I'd love to see something like that where people would have good paying jobs, where they'd be able to feed their family and survive and plan for the future, maybe for the kids. I don't know. But every day it's a battle of survival for a lot of people. And I used to get frustrated because, if we did this and if we saved money for this or didn't spend the money on that, and then you realize, well, dude, we had to eat. So that's what happened.
Well, taking a 180 and diving back into, our time left, I want to dive back into Vested. What inspired you to start Vested? Was it circa 17, 18? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I had dabbled with, I went and got in Florida, you have to have a real estate license to sell businesses. And I'd hung my shingle with another broker. It's funny. I listened to Tony Robbins one day, right, during COVID. And he did this comeback challenge thing. I don't know if you remember that, if you saw it, but he was 5 days on Facebook every day for an hour. Now, I was never a big Tony Robbins fan. It's nothing against the guy. He wasn't my cup of tea. And I had tuned into this thing, and at the end of it, there was a hook to go and listen to UPW as Unleash the Power Within, one of his big, I don't know if you've ever been or heard or seen of that, but it's a big deal. 4 days of 10, 12-hour days of rah-rah. And, I watched that, and then Cynthia and I went to the virtual UPW at home, but there was a question asked. It's like, well, why would you do this? Why do you want to? Life was fine. Life was great. But I knew there was more. I wanted more. I wanted to do more. And I went to this, and that was kind of like, okay, we're going to do this. What's the reason? The holiday's over. You're retired. Okay, get back to work, right? So what do I do? So I went to UPW, and that was the goal. Okay, get off your butt, start doing some more, start making money again, so on and so forth. And in that, I met a guy. There was a Facebook group set up after, and I met this guy up in Kentucky. Turns out he was a pastor up in a church in Kentucky. And he recommended a book to me called The 5 a.m. Club, Robin Sharma. You ever read it? It's a wonderful book. And I challenged myself, could I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning? And the book says, you can wire in new habits in 66 days and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's not me. That ain't going to work. So I committed to getting up every day at 5 a.m. for a year, one full year. When I got to one full year, I said, that was August. If I go to December, I counted out the days. I think it was it was actually the 22nd of December would have been day 500. And I said, 500 5 a.m.s in my 50s. I could write a book about that. So the first thing I did when I started the 5 a.m.s is I went and took the brokers. You know, you have to apply for the broker's exam. And, you know, that's a 6-8 month process for a lot of guys. And there's not many brokers in Pinellas County. Lots of agents. There's thousands of real estate agents, but there's only a handful of brokers. And I know why. You know, you have to do that test. And most of the guys that do the test and gals that do it are our age, which, you know. So I did my test and passed it in 30 days. Failed it the first time, took it the next day, passed. And then formed the company. And then I had read Jeff Olson's book, The Slight Edge, and he had started a company from scratch and did $100 million in the first year. And I said, that's pretty cool. And I went online, I started looking on BizBySell, started looking at all the other brokers in the state of Florida and say, who's doing what kind of business? And I was doing deals, you know, but I'm looking at who's doing business. And it's out of the the trans worlds, and so the franchise groups, which have, you know, loads of various stuff. There was nobody doing any sizable kind of business. And a lot of agents or a lot of brokers had 2 or 3 listings, and that was it and stuff. And you start to realize that, you know, the DNA of an average business broker is, you know, a couple or 3 deals a year, make $100,000, play golf. They've retired. The kids have left the nest. You know, it's an easy $100,000 a year, and it pays the boat fees or the yacht club or whatever it is. And they're busy, you know. And I'm like, well, I can't, I don't know how to work like that. I'm all in. And I said, how do I do $100 million in a year? Which is bonkers. I mean, I had done deals for $1 million, but now do 100 of them in a year. So that was the intention. That was the goal. I formed the company and, you know, got all the paperwork back from the state and all the approvals and stuff around Thanksgiving.
When was this? Of 18? Thanksgiving of 18?
Thanksgiving of 18.
Mm-hmm.
19 maybe? No, this is later than that. This would be 21.
Oh, 21, okay.
Yeah. Did the test, got the company set up, and now we're legally in business. And set a goal of $100 million. And in that first year, we did $72 million.
Wow.
And in the first 15 months, if I go to March, 15 months, straight 15 months, did $115 million. Didn't sell all of them, but sold some businesses in there. Learned a lot. Learned how not to do things. Failed at a lot of stuff on the way. Made a complete buffoon of myself a few times. But learned a lot, and learned that I really, really like this business. But I love, it's funny, when you get to a level of, and you know this, you get to a level of people who are in these family trusts and in these big VC funds and guys that move around hundreds of millions of dollars a year. It's a whole different world. And I started dealing, because I had companies for sale for 10, 20.
I don't know about it. I don't know about moving around hundreds of $millions a year.
Well, you will. You will. You're on that path. You start talking with these guys and you realize that they're uber smart. They're gentle in their persuasion of how to get things done. They have a goal and a set of metrics that they work to and a set of standards that they don't deviate from. So there's no nonsense in the middle of it all. You try selling a pizzeria for $500,000, you know, you need the whiskey by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The drama will kill you, you know. So I learned that I really liked playing in that bigger space, which means there's less buyers and it means there's less opportunities. But that's what I like to do. And you know, said we got that company down in Lakewood, right? We'll sell that for $1.5 to $2 million.
What'd you do last year, and what do you think you'll do this year?
Last year was a rough year in business, and my own fault too. I don't blame anybody for that. We tried some new marketing things that did not work the way we thought they would. Put a lot of money into it. Didn't really. That's okay. Change strategies this year again. You know, the 3 deals this week, $10 million. We'll do really well this year, please God. But you know, in all of that, we never stopped building. You know, we built 22 homes in the Philippines last year. I don't know how many thousands of kids we've had. I mean, kids we put through school. I mean, we don't stop. God has seen us through all of this stuff, regardless of what the business does. So I don't worry about it. But I know we've tried different marketing techniques and different things. It's, you know, a gal or a guy that sells residential homes, and they'll tell you the hardest part of the job is getting the listing. Mine is the same, you know. So
what went wrong last year, besides the marketing things? And
Election years are typically tough.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are uncertain about a lot of things, and we're going to wait till after this and wait for that. So that plays into it, whether I like it or not.
It's lower supply.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. So, but we did put a lot of money into some marketing things that just didn't work.
What's the biggest deal you've done to date?
About $15 million.
What kind of business was it?
A plumbing company.
Okay, cool. Locally?
No, it was in New York.
Okay. Who bought it?
A fiber optic company out of Canada.
What makes sense of that?
They were a Canadian company, wanted to get into the US market. And
Fiber optics and then plumbing?
Bingo, yeah. And this company, their 70-80% of their business was in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
So they were after, you know, something with a lot of potential that had a very stable market.
Whether it's yourself or any of your past relationships or any of the current relationships of businesses you've sold or businesses you've bought, what do you think stands is the biggest difference maker between the successful and the not successful?
Well, I mean, you can apply it to business, you can apply it to your life. The habits that you perform every day will define your business here. You know, what you do every day that works for you and being consistent with it. So in a company, in a business that consistently produces good product, consistently gives a customer more than they expect, let's say, businesses that innovate, but do it on a consistent basis, they thrive. And all of that starts with the leader in the company, and I think a lot of it comes down to his own personal habits. Because he's a reflection of, well, this company is a reflection of him.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a well-buttoned up, consistent, you know, good habit-driven type of leader, you get a great company.
One thing you mentioned earlier that I've never tied it to success, but I think does play a small part, I mean, more than a small part, but a great part in it is being gentle. You mentioned it earlier, and I've just been thinking about it since you said it. Like, when I think of gentle, I don't think more of like just super, like, you know, not like a wimp or anything, but laid back, chill, because I try to be that way, especially in our company, because people are going through junk, right? They got stuff going on. They got whatever it is they got going. We all, you know, everybody does, right? And so one thing that I think people appreciate from people that are successful, it's a gentle leader. Now, there's times, yeah, sure, that you got to be tough or you got to be a little more aggressive or whatnot. But I do agree with you that a leader has to be gentle. It has to be approachable. It has to be someone that people want to be around. If you're a jerk or come off aggressive or kind of that type A personality, people aren't going to want to be around you.
Then that begs the question, how do you cultivate that? How do you do that? And because I was once a 20-something-year-old in business and thought I could conquer the world and thought I knew it all, right? And as you get bigger, you know, your ego inflates with it, and you think you're, you know, you can do anything, you're Superman times 2. And as I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of quiet time and me time. So, and I've done this for a long time, not just since going to Harborside, because I know Kurt is a big proponent of this, but getting alone time and getting quiet. And when I was in business for myself, as we grew, and you've experienced this, I'm sure, when you grow, it's painful. You know, because you need capital, you need money, and, you know, you juggle a lot of things. And I dare say there's few businesses don't go through that are successful. So how do you, I used to say to myself, well, you know, before the banks open, the world's okay. You know, before the stock market opens, I'm going to be okay. And you learn to relish and really enjoy and keep sacred that time where you're on your own. And I know, you know, we go to Harborside, and they talk about quiet time and the secret place. But I couldn't stress that enough, no more than Kurt can, how important that is. So to be able to talk to yourself, you know, Keith Cunningham wrote a great book called The Road Less Stupid, and he talks about thinking time. Have you ever read that book? Yeah, you should read that book. It's called The Road Less Stupid. He talks about paying dumb tax in life. dumb tax, where we do stupid things that cost us. And, I would agree with him in that a lot of that can be avoided by sitting and thinking things through clearly. So to your point, you get a leader of a company. He spends a lot of time reading. You find a lot of CEOs spend a lot of time reading and trying to learn more, trying to, understand more. But I think when you get alone in the morning, and people say, well, they can do it in their truck on the way to work, and that's great. I don't know how to do that. So I like to get alone in the morning on my own with my Bible and a journal. And I got a simple 3-pager, right? I write out my prayers. And I heard this thing from Kurt a bunch of years ago called ACTS. He used the acronym ACTS, ACTS. So if you use that in its simplest form, adoration, Lord, I love you. I adore you. C, confession, forgive me for my sin, for what I've done. I screwed up yesterday, whatever it is, right? T, thanksgiving. God, you're so good to me. You're so thankful. I'm so thankful. And you elaborate on the subject. I'm running through this. And then S, supplication. Lord, here's what I got to pray about today. My kid's sick. My wife needs help with something. I need some wisdom on this deal I'm trying to put together, or whatever it is. And you start to go through that. You start stacking up internal wins almost. Because the storm is going to come. You're going to have this pain in your business as you grow. But you've built this inner confidence that, hey, you know what? I know where to go for help. That, to me, has been invaluable in my life and in my business. When you say gentle, when you see some of these, you find, and I run to a lot of Christians in business, and they have this gentleness about them, and they're beautiful people to deal with. But you find there's something in there, and that's just not a natural, that's something they have cultivated over time. Whether they're Christians or not, they've figured out the benefit of being alone and thinking things through.
I agree. Like, it's something I had to grow into. I mean, even like daily, currently. Because, especially, early on, we were growing so fast and like good days and bad days, right? And so what I've kind of wanted to drive myself into was this consistent train that didn't, and the good times didn't get too high and the bad times getting too low, because your employees thrive off of that. And I think even more practical, one thing that we can do a better job of, and not with like quarterly employee reviews that everybody does, but really going out of your way to help your team members understand they're doing a good job. And I think, even you can't see it here, or people watching can't, but like, so we're in the studio and then there's a door and it's my office. And then Victoria is the podcast producer and my EA, so she's like right there, and we work together great all day. I had an employee, I slacked him and said, hey, come here real quick. When you get a second. She comes in and she's like, well, I never do that. She's like, do I need to close the door? I'm like, no, that's good news. So she looked around, hey, you're doing a great job. You're really good at your job. I just want to thank you. Next week, she has the best week she's ever had in terms of KPIs. I don't think it's coincidence. So really going out of your way from a genuine perspective, not just fluff, because people can read fluff.
Genuine gratitude.
Yeah.
It's a great hack in life.
Yeah.
Great hack.
Yeah.
Being genuine, not just senior, but as you said, for your employees too, for people, like being genuinely grateful for where you are, what you have.
I think it's important too, because like even outside of business, just when we think about people that we like being around, they're people who are gentle. Like, I don't like being around like the alpha dogs, and like, because like, that's just not what life is. And so